Hey, what's up DIYers, Mike Borders with the Mike Borders channel. Thank you for watching. We're talking jet skis today, and this is part 2 on how to properly and safely remove your 951 DI or direct injection engine from your jet ski. Let's continue the project. All right, DIYers, we are at the workstation, and on the other side of the jet ski, you can see the workbench over there. And again, this is part 2 of the 951 direct injection or DI engine removal project. And if you have not checked out part 1, definitely check out the link scrolling above. It will bring you up to speed with where we are right now. Again, this is part 2. Check that out and then come right back to here. We'll pick up right where we left off. In addition, down below in the comment section as well as the description section will be a link on how to assemble a jet ski stand. And that is not the jet ski going on this stand. We are going to put our 95 Sea-Doo XP on that. Definitely check out that video. However, let's pick up right where we left off and get started. Making our way inside the jet ski hull from port side, and as you can see, we removed quite a lot in part 1. And we are going to start part 2 by coming starboard side, and we are going to remove that water temp sensor. I'll get the camera positioned and we'll get started. At this point, DIYers, I've got the camera position. We are looking directly under the direct fuel injection distributor. And as you can see right here, here's the forward air injector. And on the far right is the aft air injector. And directly in the middle, again, is the water temp sensor. We are going to remove that. And we need a 3/4 inch size wrench. And coming in from the front and counterclockwise, and it is important to know that these little temp sensors are held in by not only the thread but thread lock, so just be careful and patient as you remove them. There we go. And if yours is real tight, I recommend loosening it just a little bit, followed by tightening it slightly, followed by loosening it again. And that's going to break up the thread lock and also decrease the possibility of the actual sensor from snapping inside the block, and that's not what you want. But in our case, ours is pretty loose. And you may need to lift up on the distributor just so it's not interfering with the rotation of the sensor as you remove it. Once you get it to a point where you can loosen it by hand, you can do that. And as you can see, as I unscrew this and the temp sensor comes out of the block, you will notice some red thread locker. There it is, right there. We are now going to direct our attention to the ray valves and lines that feed into the valves. We will begin removing the lines, and they are secured on with clamps. At this point, I've got the camera positioned in the front or forward portion of the hull looking back at the engine. And again, we are going to carefully remove the clamps that secure the lines to the ray valves. And in addition, right back here is a 1/2 inch bolt that secures your knock sensor to the top portion of the block. We will remove that as well. And in part 1, I showed you this tool. Definitely check out the link down below on where to purchase this. And this will come in handy as you basically loosen up and remove these clamps. As you just saw, breaking these clamps free with that tool is pretty friendly. And I'll open this up just a little bit more so I can remove it. And carefully pull the line off, and it comes into a 3-way fitting here. Do not damage that as you pull this off the ray valve port here. And go slow, be precise, don't damage anything. There we go. And I'm going to take that clamp immediately off the hose or line. There it is. Followed by this one. After you loosen up that clamp, go ahead and carefully pull the line off the port, and a lot of small parts. Go ahead and remove the clamp, don't drop that. And I'm going to shift this up. And DIYers, be very, very careful as you loosen up that clamp. The last thing you want to do is break these little ports off the actual reed valves. If you do that, you'll have to replace the entire reed valve and housing, which honestly isn't a bad idea, because in the event that you're pulling your engine out for a full rebuild, it might be a really good idea to install brand new reed valves. And I'm going to shift this down even further. And now to our knock sensor. And again, a 13mm socket and ratchet. Carefully loosen this up. And hold the actual connection to alleviate the line from being damaged as you turn it. See what's happening as I turn it? It's going to put a lot of pressure on the line and lead to possible damage. So I'm going to hold this in place as I unscrew it. Once you get it to a point where you can loosen it and remove it by hand, carefully do so without dropping the bolt nor the washer. And go ahead and lift it upright and carefully allow the bolt to fall into your hand. And there's a close-up view of the top portion of the knock sensor that again feeds on this portion of your engine. I'll set that aside. And I want to show you a close-up view of, again, those little ports. Just be careful, don't break them, or again, you will have to replace the reed valves and housings, but it's not a bad idea to do so. Got the camera set back again in the front portion of the hull, looking back at the engine, and we're now going to remove the caps to the reed valves as well as the springs and 13mm bolts below. Carefully shift the little lock ring off as shown here, and you can carefully turn it. And ever so carefully lower the actual lock ring and carefully pull up on the top portion, as you see right there, as well as the spring. Do not drop this. And that's all you have to do, just remove that top cap and the spring. I'll do the same for over here. And check that out. As you see right there, the caps and springs are removed. And that's all you have to do with that. We are now going to transition to the aft portion of the hull where we have our PTO shroud. We are going to remove that. And to do so, you have two little wing nuts, which are plastic, on either side of the shroud. Go ahead and unscrew those counterclockwise, and you can pull that entire gray shroud off its inserts and connection points. At this point, the camera is now positioned directly above, looking down at the shroud, and again counterclockwise to remove each of the plastic wing nuts as shown here. And each wing nut has a washer. Try not to lose those. From here, this little tab up top shifts into this hard mount, and you can carefully shift it down and out of that little insert by carefully maneuvering the shroud downward and outward. And you can pull the entire shroud completely out. And we can see our PTO as well as our drive shaft, our carbon ring, and our bellow. How cool is that? Coming back up top port side, and before I forget, I am going to re-secure the 13mm bolt that secures the knock sensor to the top portion of the engine. I do not want to lose any hardware or become unorganized. And after that, we are going to transition to the front portion of the engine where we are going to remove several things. Number one, our electrical connection, and directly below that is our water line, and way down below is the oil line or oil hose that feeds into the lower portion of the oil pump. And I will show you a plug kit that I definitely recommend purchasing. With the camera now positioned looking at the front portion of the engine, again, this little electrical connection point, by pushing down on that tab, it will release the rear lock or inner lock and carefully shift this entire connection out. As shown there, and it has a rubber seal on it to prevent any moisture from gathering inside there. I'll set that up. And I'm back port side, and we need to clip away that zip tie so we can remove that water line. Now to a close-up view of the water line feeding into that portion of the engine. Again, you're just going to carefully shift it out and away. There's the inside of the electrical connection. No corrosion, which means that seal did its job over the years. Back starboard side, and again, I'm just going to carefully remove that hose. As shown there. Next, we will remove that lower oil hose right down there on the bottom portion of the pump. However, again, first, I want to show you a plug kit. Making our way to the workbench, and down below in the comment section as well as the description section will be a link on where to purchase this little kit here. Again, plugs. And you can see all the info right there. And on the back side, you can see all the plugs. A couple different sizes, colors, and more. If I had to guess, we are either the smaller red or the smaller blue. Either way, we'll have a few out and ready to plug that oil hose or line when it comes off the oil pump. We are now back inside the hull looking at the front portion of the engine, and there is the oil pump, and down below there is a clamp that secures that hose to the bottom portion of your pump, and it's a bit tricky to get to. And the last thing I want to recommend is damaging anything as you try to remove that hose and clamp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed upstream to the bottom portion of the filter. I'm going to cut away this zip tie as well as this zip tie, and I'm going to pull the hose off the bottom portion of the filter, and I'm going to plug the bottom filter and this portion of the hose. And I'll try to do that without making a huge mess. And do your absolute best not to damage the hose. And go ahead and retrieve both of your parts. And again, I'm going to carefully separate the hose from the bottom portion of the filter. And there's definitely going to be some oil that spills out, but I've got my plugs readily accessible. As you can see, twisting it is a better option, but don't twist it too much. As you see there, I'll plug it with my hand, and I'll use a yellow one. Come in. The yellow one plugged the filter pretty good. I'll set that aside. Make sure you plug either the bottom portion of your filter or the bottom portion that you remove from the oil pump. And that is going to prevent your hull from filling with the remaining oil that's inside your oil tank. That would get messy real fast. And DIYers, before we move on, I do want to tell you when I will actually remove that oil hose from the engine. And that will come after I remove the engine from the hull completely. And when I get the engine back from overhaul, I will re-secure the oil hose to the bottom portion of our brand new oil pump and secure it with a brand new Oerdeker clamp. Better to do it then than when the engine is installed and it's tough to get to the bottom portion of your pump. Coming inside the hull and underneath the oil pump, and what I did next was position the oil hose in a way where the oil will leak out onto the paper towel as shown down there. And again, there is the oil filter plugged with the yellow plug. At this point, I have pulled the oil hose that feeds to the bottom portion of the oil pump back out and rested it on a paper towel. And as you can see, I've got a blue plug in there. And basically all you need to do is take a paper towel and dry up the tip or opening of the oil hose and just dry it up just a little bit. And then you can actually insert a plug, and the plug itself will be able to grab a hold of the dry portion of the inner hose to plug it. And in addition, you can see the oil filter still plugged with the yellow plug. And I've got a couple paper towels. We are now going to transition to our throttle cable right down here, a 10mm wrench. Coming in from starboard side, and just ensure that you have the wrench all the way seated on the 10mm nut and counterclockwise to loosen it. In our case, ours was pretty loose. Next, I'm just untightening it by hand. There we go, as shown there. Back to starboard side, and I'll just unscrew it just a little bit more. There we go. And as you can see, there's the threaded stud. I just wanted to show you that before I remove it. And I'm going to actually have to push this down, as shown there, and feed it out. as shown there. And from here, I'm going to immediately re-secure that nut to the threaded stud. And throttle cable is 100% removed from the engine and oil pump. Take a step back and above, and in reference to the engine, we are now going to remove the 13mm bolt that secures the engine itself to the engine mount or motor mount down below, followed by the 2 additional 13mm bolts that secure the mount to the hull. We are going to remove that all together. With the camera positioned back inside the hull, we are going to start with the top bolt. And go slow. Do not rush this. The last thing you want to do is break a bolt. And I'm going to loosen it, followed by tightening it a few turns and loosening it. And just like the other bolts that are very tough, once it's loose, it's loose. Tighten and loosen. Small bolt, about 1 inch. Followed by each of the lower 13mm motor mount bolts. From here, I'm going to carefully lift up the oil line. Coming back up top, we are not going to actually remove that motor mount yet. We're going to come to the back and we are going to loosen both the aft or rear motor mount bolts. 13mm, one there, one there. Camera now positioned at the very aft portion of the hull opening, looking at the back of the engine where the PTO is and the drive shaft. And again, 2 13mm bolts that secure the engine to the mounts. And just like the front bolt, very small, about 1 inch. Grab the washer, do not drop them. And I apologize if I get in your way. At this point, DIYers, before I start moving the engine off of the mounts, you have the option to disconnect the red positive cable to your battery as well as the black negative ground, which is right here, before you actually remove your motor mounts. However, depending on your exact make, year, and model and setup, you may not actually have the clearance to remove the cables without actually removing the motor mounts and shifting the engine upright and to starboard side. However, in our case, we are going to grab the boot and just kind of work it off of the actual nut and bolt. And that is pushed back. And again, you may not actually have the clearance to remove this. So in this case, what you're going to do is carefully grab the engine and shift it forward toward the front portion of the hull and actually disconnect it from your drive shaft. In addition, you've got one more zip tie right here that you need to cut. And that holds the quick connect, the wire that feeds into the throttle body, as well as the ground wire that secures here, all to this portion of the plate. And making our way right here, you've got one additional zip tie, and we are going to snip that without damaging any of the wires. Camera back reposition at the back portion of the hull looking down, and again I'm just going to carefully shift the engine. And I went to the front and I actually removed the entire motor mount as shown here. I'm now going to remove the 10mm nut that secures the red positive cable to the starter. I'll try to get some more light in here. I'm just using a 10mm wrench. You have a small washer and nut. And I will carefully pull the red positive off the engine, and on the back side, which you don't want to lose, are two additional washers. And the smaller one is the one that goes on first when it comes time to reinstall everything. It's basically like a little pad washer. Followed by the 10mm bolt that secures the ground. And I'll set that back. It'll probably spring load forward there. Tuck it down in here. And I'm going to re-secure that 10mm bolt and washer to again stay organized and not lose any of my hardware. Do not cross thread it inside the engine. Followed by the large 17mm nut that secures the black negative to the block. 17mm bolt is now removed. I am going to pull the negative cable out of the way and re-secure that bolt inside the thread. Again, staying organized, not losing any of my hardware. Alright DIYers, hey, a quick break in the action, and again at this point we are re-securing the bolt that secured the black negative cable to the engine. And in the next clip we are going to be working in this exact section underneath the engine, and we are going to remove a water hose. And during the time we remove that water hose, you will see this bolt still securing the black negative cable to the engine. Because during filming, I removed the bolt and pulled the negative cable off the engine after I removed the water hose down below. However, in your case, it's probably best, since you're already here and working with the electrical components of the starter and system, to remove the black negative cable during this stage of the project. However, again, DIYers, I just wanted to do a quick break in the action because, again, you will see that bolt and that negative cable secured, and it might make you wonder, hey, what's that still doing there? Thought he just removed that. So again, just wanted to show you that. Let's go back to the original video. In addition, right down here, you have a water hose, and there's a clamp on that. You need to remove that clamp and pull that water hose off the bottom fitting. And coming inside the hull, I do want to show you exactly where that water hose connects onto. As you see right there. And thankfully, it is only held on by a zip tie. We are going to snip that away and again pull the water hose off the fitting there. And I'm going to set the light inside the engine hull. And again, I'm just going to carefully pull the water hose off the bottom portion of the engine, and be advised, water will leak out. And there it is. From here, we can carefully shift the engine backwards or to the forward portion of the hull and separate the PTO from the drive shaft. And DIYers, what I did next was actually move the PTO ever so slightly to give me better access to remove this clamp here, as you see. And I'll continue to turn it. and remove this clamp. Next, I'm going to pull the engine forward and separate the PTO from the drive shaft. Check that out. And I've got one little spacer right here that I'm going to retrieve so it does not get damaged. And that's for engine alignment. And from here, I need to shift the engine upright and more to port side to gain access to all the remaining connections and hoses. And be advised, there is some water inside the engine, and that is 100% normal. It is going to leak out inside the hull. And before I change camera angles, we are looking at the air pump, and you've got an order clamp that you are going to snip away and remove this hose or line. And on the back side, you have two additional lines, a black hose that's secured on by a worm clamp and an additional line that is secured by just a zip tie. Another quick reposition of the engine, and I'm going to color code that with white. Back port side, I've got the clamp loose, and I'm just going to pull that line off. And remove the clamp. Followed by the worm clamp, and I'm using a very long flathead screwdriver. And I want to scroll in just a little bit. Back to the large screwdriver. And once the clamp is loose, I'll shift it down the hose. And just be careful as you maneuver in this area. You do not want to damage your fuel distributor or your injectors. And I've got that clamp loose. We're now going to cut away this zip tie and remove both the larger hose and the smaller hose. From here, just carefully, again, without damaging your distributor, pull off each line. And you might need just a little bit of help with a flathead screwdriver. Do not damage the hose. You don't want to replace this unless you need to. There we go. And I'm going to move the throttle body a little bit, and I'm going to continue tilting the engine port side to gain better access to the lower fittings. Now coming to the front portion of the hull and in, I want to show you where we are at this point in regards to the disconnected fittings and hoses. And again, that larger hose was removed from that fitting of the air pump, and the line was removed from that fitting right there. And we are going to continue down and into this fitting right there. We have a zip tie. We will clip that away and pull this water line off the fitting here. At this point, I've got the zip tie zipped away, and in relation to the engine, I'm going to scroll in, and again, there is the hose right there or line that we're going to remove, this one right here. And I may need both hands. And DORs, I just removed it from, again, that fitting right there, and it is going to leak water. That is normal. And coming back and directly above, you can see right down there, there is an additional air hose or line. I've color coded it red, and there is a zip tie. We will cut that away and carefully remove this line from the fitting. and carefully remove this hose from the fitting. And I may need both hands. And there it is. And the port or nipple fitting, I'll scroll in so you can see it. Not much to look at. Taking a step back in DIYers, just double check everything to ensure everything is disconnected and the engine is ready to be pulled out of the hull. Have a platform ready, maybe have a friend help you in the event that you do not have a winch to pull it out. And if all looks good, again, carefully lift it up and out of the hull and carefully set it on a platform. Taking a big step back in DIYers, the engine is out and I have one additional line. And I color coded it green, and this is going to be an extremely difficult line to remove when the engine is inside the hull. As you can see, there's an Oerlikon clamp that secures it to the fitting. I'm going to remove that and pull the line off the fitting itself. And again, stay organized and color code everything, and that feeds all the way in and all the way up to the front portion of the hull. And I'm not a strong guy, so what I did was I placed my left foot here, right foot on the starboard side, and I positioned the plywood in between the hull and a towel, and lifted the engine up and carefully maneuvered it through the hull opening. And once it was through, I carefully rested it on the plywood. And what I will do now is carefully transition that engine to an additional stand with caster wheels so I can roll it to the vehicle and drive it to the shop for overhaul. However, first I do want to show you the water that does come out of the engine, and that, DIYers, is 100% normal. However, what I recommend is try your best to remove any and all electrical connections from the water, and if they get wet, go ahead and dry them off, followed by cleaning the inner hull prior to putting the engine back in. Pretty dirty, we'll soak up all that water. And I did just that. Coming back down below, I removed that line again, color coded it, stay organized. You can see the little fitting there. And DIYers, that is where we are going to wrap up part 2. Scrolling above right now, as well as down below in the comment section and description section, is part 3. And again, what we are going to do in part 3 is remove the air injectors. There is a special way to do that. Definitely check that out. We are going to remove the mount for the exhaust, and we are going to remove the starter and a couple additional items. So definitely check that out. In addition, we are going to transition the engine onto this platform here with the caster wheels and mount, or stand, shall I say. So definitely check that out. Again, we hope this helps. We are also going to return all of the hardware into the motor mounts and more. Do us a favor, below the video, you will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely ring your YouTube bell. That would be very helpful to us. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching. And again, definitely check out part 3. We will pick up right where we left off and remove the additional items to the engine. And taking a step back, and hey, DIYers, if you're still watching, I've transitioned the engine to the additional plywood and resting on our Alpha 1 Gen 1 stand. And again, part 3's got a lot of valuable information. We are going to remove additional parts, get it ready for the drive to the shop for overhaul. And in addition, we are going to talk about several of the parts and what they do for your engine. Alright, DIYers, hey, one last video before we wrap up part 2. And what I did next was grab some painter's drop cloth and just wrap the engine. And again, part 3, scrolling above a bit ago, as well as down below in the comments and description. Hope to see you there. Thanks again for watching.